What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to From the Bench. I'm your host, Will Meadows, and today is our Wednesday edition of the show where we're going to have a lot to talk about. A lot is on the table today. We're going to have football, basketball, previous games, upcoming games. We're all going to talk about it all on today's episode, and it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a great episode. We missed Monday, and if you can tell, I didn't have a voice. I'm struggling to have a voice. Church camp was fun this past Saturday, but the sinuses aren't the sinuses aren't cooperating, and in the throat, in my nasal area, I've got some water, a little bit of water here of what's left, and you can see a lot of water is not left here. And if you're wondering why, I just recorded this episode twice and forgot to hit record both times. So, third time's a charm. I know for a fact I'm recording this time. I really just got to pat myself on the back and say go you for that one. But, like I said, there's a lot to talk about today. Before I get anything, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, like the video, and follow all the socials. The handles are listed below. And comment if you went to the game this past weekend and what you thought of the atmosphere. It looked great on TV. I watched it twice. I didn't get to watch it at camp, but I recorded it and watched the rerun twice. So, got a lot to talk about. The Vols won against Kentucky, as we all know, 28-18 in a big rivalry game. Another sloppy first half, but with how today's college football and the SEC and everything is a win, and all these teams getting upset. I see a lot of people upset with how sloppy the wins are, and this, that, and the other. And all I can say is you're seventh in the country, and you're winning games, whether it's pretty or not. You're winning games. So, like I said, a sloppy first half, but you get the job. You get the job done. Nico Iamaleava played his best game of the year, in my opinion. Just looked a lot more comfortable. I've always said with Nico, I always felt like in high school he could just rip the ball across the field and fit it into the smallest of holes and throw any ball he wanted. And rightfully so. He's one of the better players, if not the best player in high school football last year or a year ago. Not last year, but the year before. He's got all the arm talent in the world. He might have the best arm in college football. Why wouldn't you? And I think, he still has that in college. But I think where his thing is, and it's just, he's a first-year starter in the SEC, I think he was thinking too much. So, he'd see this guy over here. I'm going to put you guys through a visual representation. He'd see this guy over here, and he's not that open. But with Nico's arm, he can get that throw in there. So he sees him, and he's like, no, that's not wide open. So he comes over here, and he looks over here, and that's not open. So then by the time he's like, oh, well, maybe I should throw this. It's too late. And, that's how the SEC is. And I think he was just thinking a little too much. And against Kentucky, man, he looked natural. He looked like he was playing clear-headed. He looked good. He finished the game 28 of 38 for 292 yards and a touchdown and zero interceptions, and that's what's going to win you football games, especially with this defense. It's not turning it over. Obviously, Dylan Sampson still had a fumble, but no picks, opposed to 2 picks against Alabama. That's playing good football, especially by Nico Iamaleava, so props to him. I just kind of ripped Dylan Sampson for that fumble. I'm not ripping him at all. The man of the game broke the record for the single-season touchdown at the University of Tennessee. He finished the game with 27 attempts, 142 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And, Dylan Sampson, just round of applause to you, man. All you can ask for in a player, a running back, a leader, a locker room presence. He is just the full package, and props to him. He is a touchdown machine. He's been great all year for us. He is the real deal, and I hope he comes back again next year. And if you want me to be honest, no Tennessee bias, I think he should because of how loaded this running back class is for the NFL, head of the NFL this year. So, again, hope he does, and if he does, he'll definitely break the career record. He could break the career record this year. So, props to Dylan Sampson. I mean, just going to go down as one of the better running backs in Tennessee history. Receiving-wise, our best pass catcher this game was Miles Kitselman, the tight end. Played a couple good games earlier in the year, especially against NC State. He had a good game, but we really lacked consistency and production from the tight end position. He finished the game with 6 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. And, you got to love to see that. Nico finding his tight end, but also because, the receiver room's a little banged up. Squirrel White's hurt. Dante Thornton's been banged up. Brew's been banged up. Everybody's been banged up. Mike Matthews, I mean, you name it, they've been banged up. So to see some production and kind of a safety blanket for Miles Kitselman. I mean, he was rolling out to his left and just finding Miles Kitselman down as a check down, and it's good. I mean, gets him in rhythm, a safety blanket, if you will. And when our receivers have struggled, and we'll get into that in a second of the drop passes, but with how the receivers have struggled in their own right, I mean, it's kind of nice to see some production from the tight end position, and hopefully we can get more of that throughout the year. Brew McCoy was the leading receiver, real receiver. He had 5 catches for 56 yards. And also, Peyton Lewis, the freshman running back, added the first touchdown of the game, actually, in the lonesome first half touchdown for the Vols. So, credit to him. But, yeah, like I said, Nico played his best game, and he had 3 touchdowns dropped. The worst one being Chris Brazel's deep ball. Obviously Chris Brazel is one of our better receivers. Made the great catch against Alabama to win the game. And Nico Iamaleava put it on the money in the end zone waiting on him, and he just dropped it. If you start connecting on those, that game could have been 51-18. Score 2 more touchdowns and make the field goals, which we'll get into the field goals later. But, you got to like to see some production from Miles Kitselman as and him being sure-handed as the receivers have been lack thereof of sure-handed. Chaz Nimrod dropped a touchdown as well. I mean, a lot went wrong for the Vols, but, ugly. But you find a way. Your quarterback plays good. You got arguably the best running back in the country, one of the best, and you're running football games, and you can't complain. The atmosphere was great, and the side of the ball that fed off that atmosphere was the defense. Andre Turrentine had an interception, the first interception of the game, and our GOAT, Will Brooks, had another interception and nearly returned it for 6 again, like he did against NC State. And Will Brooks has been great, man. I legitimately think, I'm not saying he's going to be a first-day pick or a second-day pick, but obviously not. But Will Brooks could play in the NFL. I mean, a great tackler. I think he's a ball hawk. I mean, he has played great. I think he's the best player, second best player in the secondary behind Gerard McCoy. So another round of applause. Will Brooks has been great for us all year, really, and he just keeps showing why. And he nearly had another pick earlier in the game in the end zone that he ended up dropping. But great game by Will Brooks. I mean, you can't complain with him. Joshua Josephs, James Pierce, Amari Thomas, all in the game with 1 sack, 3 sacks for the D-line. The D-line played great again. No complaints there. They let off a big run on the first play of the game, which, and that's not just the D-line, that's the whole defense. But can't complain with the D-line. The defense played pretty good. Again, not really many places you can complain. The Vols are in a good spot. They're 7th in the AP poll. They're 7th in the college football rankings poll that came out last night. You just got to handle business. And you really just can't lose to anybody but Georgia. And if you lose to Georgia, I think you're in, but I'm not so sure. Everybody thinks that if we just lose to Georgia and win the rest that we're in for sure. I'm not so sure. I just don't know. I think it's very scary, especially if Alabama is to beat LSU this coming weekend. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. It's our saying always on this show. Gotta beat Mississippi State first this weekend. They've got a good young quarterback in Van Buren. Just another night game in Neyland. So handle business there. Now, switching sports, Vol Hoops got their first win of the season, their first game against Gardner-Webb. It was 80-64. It was at Thompson Bowling Arena, at the Food City Center, whatever you want to call that dang place. After the Indiana game, it left some people kind of asking the question, is this going to be another one of those Rick Barnes teams that is great defensively but lacks that score? Obviously we had Connect last year right there. But were we going to lack that score? And, Chaz Lanier didn't get to play a ton in the Indiana game. He's coming off an injury, especially in the second half. He didn't play that much. But last night, he played great. He had 18 points. He was 7 of 12 from the field and 4 of 6 from the three-point line. And that's really where he excels. Last year, he shot 45% or something like that crazy at North Florida. That's going to be our guy. I think some people are still kind of asking questions or not that familiar with him. That's going to be the guy for us this year. Zakai Ziegler had 13 points for 9 assists and 2 steals. Played a great game. You know what you're getting with Zakai Ziegler on the defensive side of the ball. On-ball defense was great. Gainey, I talked about it on the last episode we talked about basketball. I would love to see Gainey take that next step, scoring, be a little more consistent. Because last year it kind of seemed like he'd come in and he'd shoot a bunch of those shots. And, if he hit, he got his minutes. But if he didn't, come on, Gainey, you're out. And I just hope that he could be more consistent off the bench for us because we're going to need that scoring off the bench, especially. Especially with a guy like Meshack, who's, as we know, I've heard that he's gotten a lot better, but he's not the best of scorers. And he's starting this year. But he also had 10 points this game. And, again, he's another one with, like Zakai. What you're getting with him on ball defense. But Gainey chimed in with 16 points and 2 rebounds, 7 of 9 from the field, and also hit 2 threes. So, great game by Jordan Gainey. If he's more consistent, this team could be scary, especially with that scoring off the bench. Some other guys that played good that didn't really just light up the box score. Igor Milicic had 8 points and played solid. One guy I liked watching was Cade Phillips, the sophomore. Kind of fell out of the rotation last year. Started a little bit. If you remember, he wore a mask for a broken nose, a broken face, something like that. And kind of fell out of the rotation after that. But he played good. Defensively, he was solid. He rebounded the ball solid. He was a lob threat. He had a dunk or two. I thought he played well. Cameron Carr, he's all right. He played all right. He had 2 points and 1 nice dunk. Some mock drafts having him 7 before the season start was just dumb. I don't even know if he's the 7th best player on this team. But, hopefully he progresses and becomes better and better. I'm never going to be against a player being good. So I just don't see it. I feel like Felix Okapara, he struggled putting the ball in the hole, but rebounding and rim protection, he was there all night. 80-64 against Gardner-Webb, and you may be thinking 16 points against Gardner-Webb, shouldn't it be a little more than that? Gardner-Webb had some good players. If you watch that game, they had some good players. And if you more pay attention to college football than you do college basketball, which I'm sure a lot of viewers, that's the case. College football has a lot of good players at smaller schools and other schools than the powerhouses. College basketball is like that on steroids. There are so many good players that are at smaller schools like Gardner-Webb. There is good players scattered all over the place in college basketball. D2s and D3s, it's ridiculous. There is good players all over the place in college basketball. And they had some tough players and some good bucket getters on that Gardner-Webb team. Tennessee did what they needed to. As soon as Gardner-Webb would kind of score some points and shorten that lead, they'd get it right back in check and extend that lead back to around 15. So, good win for the Vols. They go to Louisville this coming Saturday. I think it's at noon. I'm not for sure. I know it's going to be on the ACC network, but I'm pretty sure it's at noon. It should be a great game. Louisville had struggled a lot last year, one of the worst teams in Power 6 basketball. But they looked all right. I watched their game Monday night, and they looked all right. So it should be a good game. I think that's a game that we should win, and I think it's a game we will win, but, it's not guaranteed, so you got to go up there and win it. Around the SEC for basketball. Well, before I get it around the SEC, I don't know if anybody watched Gonzaga absolutely kill Baylor in a game that was the top 10. I mean, it was like a 30, 40-point beat down. So there's that. But around the SEC, everybody really handled business outside of one team, which was Texas A&M, who lost. They were the 13th ranked team in the country, Texas A&M was, and lost to UCF. And UCF stormed the court on them. And that team Wade Taylor is a good player, but he's so inconsistent. And that team's not the 13th best team in the country. UCF's a good team, don't get me wrong. D.R. Johnson is good. J.J. Taylor is good. That team is good. But, they didn't handle business. Florida kind of struggled with USF a little early, but then they started doing their thing. I think Florida's going to be a sneaky good team this year. Ole Miss got started early, got their new transfer, 24 points out of him. Ole Miss is going to be solid this year. Alabama won by like 60. I think it was against UNC Wilmington. Kentucky started the Mark Pope era, won by like 50. I mean, most teams in the SEC got it done. Georgia only beat Tennessee Tech by like 5 or something. So, it'll be another interesting year for Georgia basketball. But, the SEC is going to be up for grabs. I think it's going to be between us, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Florida and Alabama. Sorry. Is my guess. I know a lot of people Alabama is the favorite to win the national championship for a lot of people, but that team's going to be good. Mark Sears is one of the better point guards in the country, and we're going to have to see. Sorry that my voice is so out of it. I'm really trying here. But that's it for the basketball side of things. Around the SEC for football, this past week, the one that stood out to me, which there was a big upset, but the one that really stood out to me was Ole Miss handling Arkansas the way they did. They hung like 60-something on them. Jackson Dart threw for 500-plus yards and 5 touchdowns, and Juju Watkins, goodness gracious, I'm so sorry, had like 250 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns, something ridiculous. They looked really good. It was the best their offenses looked versus an SEC opponent. And a game that kind of seemed like a game Ole Miss could lose, they handled business and really laid it on Arkansas. That's the one that stood out to me the most. Another one was a loss for Texas A&M. It was an upset. South Carolina beat Texas A&M. I think it was 44-20. A&M, they're not knocked out of playoff contention because, they could still beat Texas and finish 10-2, but it definitely doesn't help them. I was worried about that game for them, but that South Carolina defense is legit. They've got some dogs. Dylan Stewart's one of the best freshmen in the country. That South Carolina team's a top 25 team for sure, in my opinion. That defense is nasty. Florida versus Georgia. Call me crazy. If DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt for Florida, their quarterback, Florida wins that game. And I actually picked, and I wish I wasn't at church camp and I had a phone, but some of the people there can back me up. I picked Florida to beat Georgia. I did call that, and I really feel like I would have been right if DJ Lagway didn't get hurt. So, that one kind of stings. I mean, not stings because we kind of need Georgia to be good, but could have been right. Could have looked really good for that one, but it is what it is. Everybody thinks right now with the Vols that, you just went out and lose to Georgia that you're going to be in, and I'm just not so sure. I mean, there's a lot of teams in the SEC in playoff contention. There's Georgia, Texas, us, Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss. A&M is still in it. That's 7 teams right there that are in the hunt for the playoffs out of the SEC, and the SEC is so odd with two lost teams and 1 lost teams all over the place, and it's wide open in the SEC. And I don't even know especially if Alabama wins this weekend against LSU and then wins out, if they won't put an Alabama in over us. And I know we have the head-to-head against Alabama, but it's going to be really complicated. I think that the sentence for Tennessee for the rest of the year is handle business. That's going to be what they're going to have to do. don't get too worried about what Georgia brings. That night game is going to be electric at Georgia in Athens. But, you got to handle business. That's the sentence for the rest of the year for the Vols is handle business. Can't look ahead to Georgia like we did for Alabama, or looked ahead to Florida and Alabama and let Arkansas beat us. You got to handle business. And, if you went out, you're in the SEC championship and you're in the playoffs. But, that's a lot easier said than done. But I think we can go beat Georgia. A lot of people just kind of have us wrote off for that game. But Carson Beck is not playing good. He has 11 picks in 5 games. I mean, he's not playing good football. And with how good our defense is, I think we could go up there and give Georgia a run for their money in Athens at night. But that game's going to be on fire. Athens will be on fire. So, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, like we like to say. But the SEC is more wide open than it's ever been in football and basketball, but obviously more on football because it's getting closer to the time for the postseason. But I'm excited for basketball season. I'm excited to see what football season brings in the first ever college football. Not first ever, but first for this year projection. They had us hosting a game in Neyland for the playoffs. So just imagine how special that atmosphere would be on Rocky Top. I mean, it would be absolutely ridiculous. So I think that's going to wrap up this episode. Again, I'm sorry for the voice. Sinuses are all over the place, but we're going through it. That's why I couldn't speak on Monday. But we're here. We're ready. We're going to have an episode on Friday that's going to talk about the games to come for Tennessee football and Tennessee basketball, mainly on football, but basketball's got Louisville, football's got Mississippi State at noon, 7:30, 7:45, somewhere around there. Going to be a big day for Tennessee sports this coming Saturday, and we're going to unpack it all on Friday. But thank you guys for watching this episode of From the Bench. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment. If you're at the game on Saturday, if you went to the game Monday for Tennessee basketball, or if you're going to the games this coming weekend, let me know. And how you feel about where Tennessee's at right now. Leave it all down in the comments. I'd love to respond to some of you guys and hear what you guys have to say. But I think that's going to close it up for this Wednesday edition of From the Bench. Thank you guys for watching, and go Vols.